SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
State Treasurer David McRae is returning record amounts of money to Mississippians, whether it's through the College and Career Savings Program or the hundreds of millions in unclaimed money awaiting your claim. Treasurer David McRae says get your applications and claims in today. Treasury.ms.gov.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
All right, what AI bubble? Man, oh man, how about NVIDIA? I just didn't expect that. Although, I will say, yesterday, Thomas in Greenwood asked me, you probably saw that text, Rhino, what I thought NVIDIA's quarterly report was going to look like. And I said I thought it was going to be a blowout quarter and that their guidance, which is really what the markets focus on, what are they going to do in the future? What does the opportunity pipeline look like, sales, etc.? I said I thought that was also going to be quite strong. Turns out that was the case. Their shares rose up at this moment as well on stronger than expected revenue and a very rosy outlook. So, sales in the quarter, $57 billion. That's compared to a $54 billion estimate. The current quarter that we're in right now, they expect that to rise to $65 billion. How about that? An $8 billion increase quarter over quarter. But here's the part that just blows me away. Net income. This has got to be the biggest quarterly net income ever posted by a company. $32 billion. In a quarter on sales of 57. I believe that calculates out to just under 60%. I can't comprehend it. 60%. That is just an unbelievable testament, I think, to something we discussed yesterday, American innovation and capitalism. Liz Warren's got to be hyperventilating over the amount of profit his company made in the quarter. Unbelievable. So you can extrapolate if they were continue for the next 3 quarters, so a 4-quarter trailing quarter net income, you're looking at over $130 billion of net income for a year. Now, I happen to think that the company is going to produce $200 billion of net income for next year. And I know that the cost of health care is currently on everybody's mind, as it should be, because it's going through the roof. Cost of insurance, out of control, becoming unaffordable for many. Average price, a report. Yeah, it's been headed in that direction. It's been that way, but there doesn't seem to be any sign of slowdown in the trajectory, right? So,
thanks, Obama.
Yeah. $27,000, the average family premium in this country. $27,000. a year. I can't comprehend that, how crazy that is. That's where we are. But I know we like to tar and feather the insurance companies, those people who sell the coverage, and I certainly don't defend them whatsoever. But just looking at NVIDIA making $32 billion in a quarter, you take the top 7 insurers, and their net profit was about $40 for the year combined. Something else has got to give. I think the key, maybe more than anything, is to introduce some transparency, not so much into health insurance, but the cost of health care. You know this. You could, if you checked around, say, local hospitals, you find situations where the same procedure is a tenth of what it is down the street. And there's no rhyme or reason to that. It's almost as kooky as shopping for airline tickets. I mean, if that doesn't defy all logic, I don't know what does. So I think that's what we need. And the other thing that, with respect to the marketplaces, the subsidies, the issue that was at the core of the government shutdown, those enhanced subsidies enacted under the Biden administration, scheduled to expire at the end of the year. Republicans have said, yeah, with a handshake, we're going to talk about that in December. I don't know if that happens. But I think the structure, Rhino, of those subsidies was wrong. And here's what I mean by that. To your point, thanks, Obama. Here's what I mean by that. It doesn't matter what the insurance companies charge for the coverage. The subsidies are structured to cap the buyer's cost of premiums as a percentage of their income. So I know this is crazy, but just hypothetically, if an insurance company sold their coverage in the marketplace and it's $1 million a year for coverage, the most anybody's paying for that is 8.5% of their income. So if you make $100,000 a year, you're paying $8,500, and the taxpayers have the remaining $992,000. Pardon me. You know what I'm saying? So that's the problem with the structure. Now, is it quite possible that the insurance lobby was putting the pressure on the Democrats that passed this law? No, that would be shocking to find out that was the case. But that literally is how. So no matter what they charge it for, in the exchanges, your premiums are capped. And the theory the Democrats had, because they always know more about how to run your financial affairs in your household than you do, is that nobody should ever have to pay more than 8.5%. For their income for health insurance. And it starts, by the way, at the original law at 2%, and then it scales up to 8.5% with about 4 ranges of incomes from 100 to 150, 150 to 200 of the percent of the poverty level. And then the enhancements came along and just kind of shifted all those up, if you will, on the grid, on the scale, so that the 100 to 150 was 0, 150 to 200 was 2%. In other words, 2% of your income. And that's why you see people saying, well, I'm paying $20 a month now. When it goes to $50, I'm out. Literally, there are people saying that. Pay no mind to the fact that the taxpayers are picking up. You're picking up 20, and they're picking up 1,000. Literally, that's how it works. What a dumb design that was. And so that suppresses competition, and it, at a minimum, produces complacency among the insurance companies, because they know it doesn't really matter what we stick that in the exchange for. The maximum anybody's going to have to pay. And they're going to choose.
Pretty much in any industry, any business whatsoever, if they see a sizable enough portion of their bottom line coming from tax dollars, from the government, from your pocketbook, from your hard-earned labor, they get lazy and complacent.
And that's a problem. And it's particularly a problem here in that it's a shared model between the policyholder, the buyer of the coverage, and the taxpayer. That literally is how it works, how it's funded. And the structure of the most you'll ever have to pay. So I really think that some reform, really modest reforms, we should peg these subsidies to low-cost benchmark plans. And I think that would reduce a lot of the overspending rather than have these three levels, and it's so convoluted and complicated. The average person can't figure it out, honestly. So peg that to the low cost, and that would eliminate this zero premium gaming. And what I mean by that, you know what they do? They come in and say, okay, well, we're going to give you zero premiums for this level of coverage, but we're going to have these amount of deductibles to offset that. And there's just a lot of number manipulation that goes on in that process. It's just a terrible design that needs to be rethought and
almost
restructured.
like it was designed to kill the current system to usher in government health care.
And I want to be clear, you got to allow the insurance companies to make a profit if you don't want government health care. You can't have some both there. But we got to fix the way it works. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. We got Leah Long at 10:35 with the NFIB.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Bring it on! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The blues has got a hold of me. I believe I'm getting dizzy. I keep thinking about that night in Memphis. Lord, I thought I was in heaven. I keep thinking about the night.
So, just recapping NVIDIA here, you know, I said yesterday when we were on the air that how their report goes after the bell, which was after the show yesterday, is going to dictate the trajectory of the market. Now, it's off its highs today. The NASDAQ now down, up 250 points. It was up as much as 450. The Dow's still hanging in there at almost 500 points when I checked it a second ago. So it's 325 now. Okay, so it's off its highs. Nonetheless, though, this is a welcome respite from the prior 4 days where we were down. The indexes were down 4 days in a row. So this blowout report indicates that we don't have a bubble. I mean, there was predictions, you know that, of this bubble driven by the explosion of technology stocks. They're getting too frothy, too expensive, and, man, one little hiccup, I do think, would have sent the markets downward precipitously. But Jensen Huang comes out and says, nope, we got $500 billion of orders waiting. That's just amazing. But having a $32 billion quarter. Walmart, by the way, made about $18 billion last year. And NVIDIA made $32 billion in one quarter. It's just incredible. And, of course, that's driving all the other technology stocks up as well. So I think that we're going to see the tax cuts, deregulation, and the settling of the tariff issue all start to come into play about mid-year next year. And I think we're going to see just strong economic growth and performance. The only thing that could screw that up is the government, of course. But I think we're in the clear at least until the midterms. And the Atlanta Fed now is predicting a 4% GDP for the quarter. That's unheard of. That's hearkening back to the Reagan days when we had massive economic growth as a result of cutting taxes and regulations. So this is good news for Americans. Now, of course, what Americans want is to see the cost of living contained. Sure, that's what they want. So this idea of affordability is now the new buzzword, affordability. And here's what I would caution. I think, Rhino, to a great extent, what people are looking for is a return to the price environment pre-COVID, 2019. That's not going to happen. But wages aren't returning to 2019 either. So reports we have now do indicate wages are outpacing inflation, because inflation is, generally speaking, it's still there, but it's in check. So we can expect continued inflation, but at a very small rate. What got us all upset was in 22, Biden, in his defiant way, passes in 21, actually, the American Rescue Plan. We didn't need a rescue, but you had to pour fuel on the fire there, and that ignited inflation. And in 22, it was 9%. You remember that distinctly. And the worst part was your wages weren't keeping up with that. And so, even though this is the games that
and
politicians...
the people in charge kept saying, it's transitory.
Correct. So, this is the game that they play, though. I've seen it among the Biden loyalists. It is true that in the last year of his presidency, in 24, for the year that wages did outpace slightly inflation, the CPI. So so-called real wages were positive. In other words, you had more money to spend relative to the amount that stuff was going up in price. However, what they want, and the Joe Biden was seeing real wages go up. Right. For one of the 4 years. What they won't discuss in an honest, transparent, and open way. I know you're shocked that politicians wouldn't be totally forthcoming and would shape the narrative to suit their political purposes, which I just detest, by the way. They won't tell you about the whole 4 years. No. Over the 4 years, real wages declined under Biden. In other words, inflation clearly outpaced the amount of money you had to spend. Now, in Mr. Trump's first year, we're still in it, wages are outpacing inflation. That's real gain. But we're still trying to catch up from the Biden debacle of the 4 years. So, point is, we're not going back to 2019 pricing. What we can expect, however, is that inflation stays relatively stable, in check. It's not through the roof. You're not every time you go to the store, oh my gosh, it went up again. No, slight gradual increases while your wages continue to churn upward because of economic growth. I mean, that's the strategy. And that's what capitalists believe. And we're going to do that because good policy produces more supply. More supply increases overall economic activity, and wages follow suit. And we did get, by the way, the jobs report today, and it surprised. It's a bit bifurcated, shall we say. We added 119,000 jobs in September. Remember, we couldn't get October. Now, by the way, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you probably saw that, said, yeah, we're just going to combine October and November. I don't know how the heck they're going to do that. But in December, when they announced the jobs situation for November, it's going to be the combined 2 months. Again, I don't know how they do that.
On the phone survey, you just changed the question, or you asked two questions. Were you looking for employment or employed during October?
That's right.
Were you looking for employment or employed during November?
I guess so. But you know how I feel. I don't have a lot of confidence in that process. Neither does the president, by the way. And it's because every time you put numbers out, 2 months later, we got to revise it. Not by a little bit, by a lot. And that's a problem. You might be pleased to know the federal government jobs in the September report declined by 3,000, construction up 19, leisure and hospitality, the big winner, 47,000 person increase, 20,000 in professional services down. So
But, I mean, leisure and hospitality lost hundreds of thousands since COVID.
That's right. Just kind of getting back to normal. I would agree. But the other big data point, and that's why it's kind of a bifurcated report, is that unemployment ticked up from 4.3 to 4.4%. So what a quandary this puts the Federal Reserve in when they've got that, again, bifurcated data set. Because remember, their mandate is maximum employment and price stability. But I'm going to say one more time, the big thing is right now wages are rising faster than inflation. Now that's in aggregate across the nation. I'd be curious to know from our audience, your situation certainly could be different. You may not be experiencing a wage increase. You may not see inflation in what you buy. But that's what the data on aggregate shows, is that wages are going up, prices are staying relatively level, thus you've got a net improvement in real wages. Paul and Meridian, we're talking about insurance. Bring back catastrophic policies and or customized insurance policies. Stop requiring insurance companies to cover men's pregnancies. And that's the point Rhino makes all the time. And I agree, and I would just say this, though, Paul. I believe that that's a good idea as long as people who sign up for that know. I mean, it might even make sense to say, hey, look, if you don't have enough money to cover it, you're going to sign, you are not going to sign up for such coverage. You sign some release that says, okay, I don't have to be treated. I mean, I don't know, because it doesn't help if you buy cheaper insurance that covers less, but you still end up using it for treatments, medical care that's not covered, and then you're just added to the pot of uninsured expenses. That doesn't help anybody. That just means that the people who do have more robust coverage are covering for you, and that's kind of what we have today. So there's got to be some, I believe, stipulation as part of that. Now, I know that sounds harsh. I get it. And that's not how we operate. You show up in the ERs, we've talked about many times, whether you pay or not, you're going to get treated. And by the way, your immigration status doesn't matter either. You can be an illegal that crossed the border yesterday or today, literally. And if you get sick and you go to the ER, they're going to take care of you. And we've seen hospitals across the country report, they're starting to really crowd out Americans in the ERs, and that's because Biden opened the dang door. And the bottom line is that. It just created so many problems. That's just one of them. Leah Long with the National Federation of Independent Small Business, she's the director for Mississippi and Louisiana, is up next.
From theseabrook.com. The Curve.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Queen of Soul. Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. It's Leah Long with the National Federation of Independent Small Business, serves as the director for that organization for Mississippi and Louisiana. Hey, Leah.
Hey, thanks for having me on this morning.
You bet. Good to have you. So give us an update on how small businesses are feeling about the economy and the outlook as we head into the busy shopping holiday season.
Yeah, so the latest results of our monthly survey is it is unfortunately a little bit lower. Optimism's a little bit lower, still higher than it has been in the past few years. But, costs are high and, hiring is still tough for these small business owners. And we've had a little bit of slowing sales and obviously the supply chain issues the last couple of, months especially. It's added to the economic uncertainty that these business owners are feeling right now.
Okay, what do they need to see? I guess, to feel a little better, because we're seeing consumer sentiment, which, of course, drives spending at these small businesses. It also is fairly low, as a matter of fact. The recent surveys by the University of Michigan who tracks that. So the consumers aren't feeling great about the situation either. What do you think?
I think it's just a balancing act between the consumers, the business owners, and, like I said, everything that's been going on in the economy. And, we talk about hiring on here all the time, which I know Governor Reeves put out that, hey, one of his biggest things for 2027 is workforce development in the state of Mississippi. And so right now, 27% of small business owners report that labor quality and hiring is one of their biggest issues. And so, you have the jobs, but you got to have the people to work there. You got to have people to go to work to be able to spend the money so they can invest back in Mississippi. And I think that's something that we've got to focus on in 2026 and 2027 for sure.
Leah, what are they saying about the cost of labor?
Cost of labor, everything's getting more expensive. We talk about that. It's just everything is, super high right now. You still have business owners dealing with inflation. That didn't change overnight. You're still doing that. The supply chain issues, things have got more expensive to get. And so the cost of labor to hire and employ people are more expensive now. And it's a balancing act toward the end. When things are more expensive, does that small business owner eat the cost of that, or do they pass it on to consumers, which obviously affects consumer spending?
Sure. The one thing they do have some clarity about, you and I have talked about before, is the tax environment. So fortunately, we got the Trump tax cuts that were passed in 2017 extended, made permanent, especially for the pass-through deduction, as you know, I suspect that many of your members take advantage of. That was a big thing. That was critical. Their tax bill would have gone up by as much as 20%. Which is significant, had that not been extended.
Absolutely. That was a huge win with this administration and, added to more, future planning for these business owners. Like you said, it would affect every small business owner. A lot of that could take a small business owner out. 20% tax hike, that's crazy. Yeah. And so, we're thankful for that. We're thankful that it got signed and that did, move forward. And we always love opportunities like that. And so, obviously, Mississippi's lowered their personal income tax rate and continues to do that. I love doing Louisiana and Mississippi. It's a competition every legislative session. Who's going to do what? And so, I think as Mississippi continues to make it more business friendly, it's going to be a better environment for these small business owners also.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, are there any other policies that your members are in particular interested in that, let's talk about the state of Mississippi, of course, that's our audience. You've probably been made aware of the legislative priorities that our speaker, our lieutenant governor, our governor, those are the three key leaders in the lawmaking process, have espoused for the coming 26th session. Anything you guys are watching there?
We just obviously continue to watch, the overreach of, mandates on business owners. So we try to, keep involved in that and make sure it's not too tough for these business owners. But like I said, workforce development is going to be a huge thing. And we talk about insurance. We talk about the cost of health insurance. And, that's a battle that they're fighting all over the country. So anywhere that we can lower those insurance costs for business owners is going to be great too. And, moving into holiday session. Of course, we start January 6th in Mississippi, so it'll be here before we know it. But, we're coming up on the holiday season, and that's a huge season for small business owners. And so I always love to throw in that 67 cents of every dollar that you spend in a small business stays in that community. Mm-hmm. And so I always love to throw the number that 47% of the workforce in Mississippi is employed by small business owners. Yeah. So remember that.
So, absolutely. So, with respect to health insurance, that's been something that's gotten a lot of attention on the national landscape with the shutdown of the government and so forth. Do your members have kind of a position on that? Do most of your members offer group coverage to their employees? If they've got fewer, as you know, than 50 employees, they're not compelled by government to do so.
If they're able to, some do or some don't. It's just business, individually how they do it. And that adds to, finding a qualified worker.
Yeah.
You want to offer a great compensation package and benefits to your employees, but it always takes a lot of capital if you are hiring in a small business, because you don't usually have an HR team available. If it's 10 or less employees, you're sitting there training that person and investing your own capital into that employee, and you hope that they stay. So, as a small business owner, you want to offer your employees the best benefits that you can based on, your profits and loss ratio.
Yeah. It is the issue with the employment, which I think every time you come on, of course, that's a major issue, and it's a major issue across the country. It seems to be more so for small businesses than it does many of the bigger corporations. Heck, many of them are shedding employees right now. Is it a qualifications issue, or it's a numbers problem? There just aren't enough people out there that are looking for work. There's an imbalance. All the above.
It's kind of all the above. And you think about industries, construction industry, transportation industry, those kind of being able to find those qualified workers. And I know Mississippi spent a lot of time investing in, community college and trade school programs, public-private programs to be able to get people in these jobs.
Right.
And I think that's important too. And, whether you're in a big company or not, sometimes, those contract jobs that are in a big plant or in a big shipbuilding plant might be an independent contractor that's using their business for that. So they've got to have those employees too.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. What about, we've talked about state. We've done a good job, I think, in the state of Mississippi. We're phasing out the income tax. I feel like we have a fairly business-friendly regulatory environment. Anything along those lines your members talk about they'd like to see perhaps relaxed? I know the permitting process in Mississippi, I think we still got some work to do there in certain industries.
Yeah, definitely the permitting process is something I would love to see kind of reformed and revised, make it easier if people want to go to work and build something and do that. We should be able to let them do that. It does add to the economy in Mississippi. So I would love to see a little bit of reform done on that in this next session for sure.
Okay. A couple of high-profile matters we're going to be watching in Mississippi are the issue of education freedom, school choice. Our Speaker of the House has said that's a top priority. It is his top priority. Do your members talk about that? Do they have a position?
We don't necessarily engage the members on, school choice and education, but,
okay.
It always comes down to education in the community. You keep your people there. And so I think it all kind of plays hand in hand. But
yeah.
We've never fully engaged their position on it.
Okay. We have the issue of mobile sports betting that I think is going to come up again here in Mississippi. Any particular position there from your members?
No, we don't have a position on that. It's kind of each their own on that.
Okay. What is your group lobbying for these days at the federal level? What do you need for small businesses?
So the beneficial ownership, we've talked about that a lot. That was kind of pushed off. And so we're hoping to eventually get that made where it's not into law, because there was actually quite a few businesses in Mississippi that complied with that. It was an overreach of information, basically. I know we've talked on here a lot, but the fines were insane. If you didn't complete it, it was like $1,000 a day, even jail time. So just continue to watch those things as they come up, to in fear on small business owners and the information that the Secretary of State already has. So that's a big thing that we're going to continue to watch, and hopefully that kind of stays pushed away for a while.
Okay. The midterms coming up in about a year. Do you guys have some thoughts, concerns, desires there at this point?
We obviously want to continue on the federal level to make sure that it stays as business friendly as possible. And so we'll continue to engage in that when it's necessary. And hopefully we continue to do well. The tax break, the 20% tax deduction was huge. So we're kind of staying on that high right now and thanking the federal people for that.
And the immediate expensing is a big issue too, is it not, for your members?
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. So watching that and continue to engage as things change.
Yep. Leah Long, the director for the National Federation of Independent Small Business for Mississippi and Louisiana, has been our guest. Always enjoy talking to you, Leah. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
We're coming right back from the Element Wealth studio.
that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Are you thinking about or planning for retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. The C Spire text line, it's wide open. 601-879-4395. Today on In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear an interview with the voice of the Atlanta Braves and Mississippi native Ben Ingram. And later on in the program, Rhino's going to give away some tickets to Chicago. So there's a lot of discussion going on really with the negotiation of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which had as its primary goal to extend the Trump tax cuts enacted in 2017. But there were some reforms made to the various financial assistance programs. I'm going to be nice and refer to them thusly at the federal level. One of those is the SNAP program. Now, that's gotten a lot of attention lately because during the shutdown, the benefits were shut down as well. Couldn't get the money out. Now, the government's in the process of catching that up, so that really didn't endure for too terribly long. But, of course, one of the reforms in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act concerning SNAP dealt with work requirements. Now, there's some folks out there that are saying that, well, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act imposed work requirements to qualify for food stamps. Not true. That's always been a requirement. However, the work requirements were changed. So it's not true that up to this point there's been no work requirements to qualify for SNAP. What is happening, however, is that those work requirements previously applied to adults ages 18 through 54 and who were physically and mentally able and don't have dependents. That ain't a lot of people, honestly, when you look at the way the coverage is comprised in SNAP. But what happened is the age of 54 has been increased to 64, which is crazy. I don't know where they came up with a 54. I guess when that was created a long time ago, the thinking was, well, folks over 54, really, we can't ask them to work. Well, that's crazy these days. So that's just been, I would say, updated to reality. So now you got to work if you're between the ages of 55 and 64 and your income is below 130% of the federal poverty level. Those are the key requirements. And you don't have any dependents. You see where I'm going. And you don't, you're mentally and physically able. Then you got to work. Now, the other change is that if you have children younger than 14, you're exempt from the work requirement. But if they're older than 14, you're not. So that the age was increased. I think it used to be 8, if I'm not mistaken. And then it also repeals work exemptions, talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which reformed the SNAP program. Exemptions, in other words, the following groups of people were not required to work to qualify, and that's homeless individuals, veterans, and young adults aging out of foster care. I got to tell you, I didn't know they were exempt from the work requirement until I started digging into the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and noted the reforms that are contained within it. So, and then the other thing finally it did with respect to work requirements is limits the ability of states to waive work requirements in areas lacking jobs. Interesting. Now, to satisfy the work requirements, it's not exactly what you think. Doesn't mean you're showing up at a workplace every day and punching the clock or whatever the nature of the work is, using punching the clock as a metaphor, if you will. If you volunteer or participate in job training for at least 80 hours a month or work 80 hours a month, that's roughly 20 hours a week, then you satisfy the work requirement. I think we could have drafted even tighter reforms than we did. I don't think this is going to move the needle a lot. Some say yes, some 2 million won't qualify as a result of this. I'm not sure. But I wanted to point out we've always had work requirements. They've been reformed. And those work requirements mean if you volunteer, if you're in job training, if you can show that for 80 hours a month. And by the way, this notion of reapplying, you have to do that every 6 months now. So I don't know that changes anything. My concern is to not my problem people. We're coming right back after Fox News at SuperTalk News with Congressman Michael Guest.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Hour 2 of Middays is now live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Friday Eve.
All right, we getting the congressman set up. I think we're trying to get in touch with him, having some communications technical difficulties. In the meanwhile, while Rhino's taking care of that for us. On the C Spire text line, the Democrats set the Republicans up so they look like the bad guys. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, in reference to this expiration of the enhanced subsidies. Yeah, there's going to be some people, I've said that, when they get there, and they're getting them now. There are notifications on the premiums, and they're seeing those go up. And it's probable that they're blaming Republicans for that because Democrats wanted to extend that, the enhanced subsidies, which keeps their premiums at the cost they were. Nobody likes to see anything go up. I mean, anytime they see the price go up, they want somebody to blame. They want a pound of flesh, no doubt. And I think the Democrats are going to use that effectively. I think it's the right policy to let those enhanced subsidies expire. But unfortunately, it's just really hard to claw back welfare. It just is. And when you do it, you're the devil, no doubt. Let's see. On the C Spire text line, I can guarantee you 75% of the people I see using food stamps are very capable of working. They also drive vehicles that are better than most. In my opinion, most food stamp beneficiaries are being catered to by Democrats such as Benny Thompson to keep his votes. They want people to be poor, and they thrive off being given free stuff, just like New York, offer free stuff, get elected. There's no doubt that the program is fraught with misspending and misapplication of the rules. Okay, we got Congressman Michael Guest on with us. Hey, Congressman.
Good morning, Gerard. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Just sitting here talking about, as you probably heard, the SNAP program and Secretary Brooke Rollins of Agriculture requiring everyone to reapply. Of course, as you know, we have a process for that now. Every 6 months, you've got to recertify. I think the problem, however, is that the system itself just desperately needs modernizing, that the people who apply, most of the fraud, it's been determined, is the result of just being dishonest about their income, their work situation, all the other qualifications. This is just a hard one, and I think we need better systems to really help determine that folks who are enrolled in receiving those benefits are truly eligible.
I agree completely. We need enhanced verification to make sure that we are servicing the people who truly deserve those benefits, but we're stopping the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah.
Congress has also sought to put in place some work requirements that would go into place in 2027. And I think the other component of that, Gerard, is when we do identify particularly fraud, people who are fleecing the system, I think it's important that those individuals be prosecuted. Not talking about people who may have believed that they received the benefits, but we know that there are people who do not qualify. They know that they don't qualify, but they continue to receive those benefits. And until they see that there's a consequence to that, we're going to have people that are going to take advantage of the charity of the American people, and they are going to fleece the taxpayers of the United States.
Yeah, and as you know, they're supposed to submit all that information online, medical expenses, proof of income, citizenship, and so forth, and then they're supposed to submit to an interview by someone that is working in the SNAP program at the state level. And then it takes, on average, about 30 days for a decision to be made. They actually complete what's called an eligibility interview, and then the state verifies. But I think it's pretty difficult to figure out whether or not all that information is accurate. Income and where you live and medical expenses and ability to work and then to prove you're working or satisfying the community service requirement, full-time student, et cetera. These programs I think they need some revamping just to make sure that we're only sending benefits out to people who truly qualify.
Yeah, and I agree. And this is something, Gerard, that particularly is you have some expertise in is, what can we do to make sure that, one, all of these systems, these databases are communicating with one another so that the information that is collected by SNAP, that can be compared to other information as far as wages and earnings and things of that nature. And then how can we utilize AI to help us identify potential areas of abuse and fraud? Because we know that, that there is, as we continue to advance in technology, that we're going to have to be depending upon systems like that. And again, you can speak much more intelligently about the need for the interconnection of these systems and how AI can help us be able to weed out those people who don't belong in the system. But that's something, that I think is very important. I think many of us, when we saw that SNAP benefits were going to be reduced, we saw videos posted online of individuals who, at least some of the videos that I saw, would indicate to me that some of these individuals were gaming the system, that some of these individuals, they were showing up driving a nicer vehicle than I was.
No doubt.
SNAP benefits to go out and to purchase groceries for their family. I even saw something where someone was called out by another individual online that the person was in one post complaining about the fact that their SNAP benefits were being reduced, but in a post the week before was talking about how they had purchased tickets to a professional football game for them and their family, and that they were looking forward to being able to take their family to a professional sporting event.
Unbelievable.
And so clearly there was some disposable income that this individual had, and it was not necessarily money that the SNAP benefits was not necessarily money that they were depending upon living. They were just using their personal income for things of leisure and pleasure versus actually paying for the needed expenses of those families. And so I do think that was one thing that we identified during the 6-week shutdown that the Democrats put us through, is that there is waste, there is fraud, there is abuse, We do need to make sure that people are re-registering, that we're collecting the proper information, and that we're doing a deep dive into that information because there is a great deal of abuse and fraud in that program, and that I think many of us recognize.
Totally right. And you're so right. We should be engaging technology more, and in particular now with AI. And I'm not so sure, Congressman, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I start thinking about these programs, and you discussing a case where somebody's bragging about having tickets to a major sporting event, which you got to have some disposable income, as you note, to do that, but yet they're complaining about their SNAP benefits. That aggravates people a lot, and I know you hear that. But maybe it's a situation where, hey, if we're going to give you these benefits, well, then we maybe need to have you forego some of your privacy. Like maybe we need to be able to know how they're spending their money in exchange for these benefits, because otherwise they just manipulate and game and honestly misrepresent, and they end up getting them.
Yeah, again, anything that we can do to verify that the information that the government is receiving is accurate, anything that we can put in place to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, I think is needed. I also think that as far as the SNAP benefits, that we should be able to place limits on those benefits as to what food products that they can purchase.
Absolutely.
We currently prohibit alcohol and tobacco products from being used. But if we're going to promote a healthy lifestyle, and if the federal government is going to be giving individuals money for which they can use to purchase groceries for their families, I'm all in favor of, hey, let's making sure that we are encouraging people to purchase healthy foods. Fruits, vegetables, those things, dairy products, those things which are much healthier than, say, some of the processed foods, some of the sugary drinks, some of the candies and desserts that people sometimes use those funds for. And again, if you're making your own money and you want to spend your money on however you want to do that at the grocery store, if you want to go and purchase nothing but sugary drinks and sweets, if you're making that money, you should have that choice. Sure. But if we as the government, if we are giving money for people to have those, what really should be staples of their diet, then I think we should look at putting restrictions in place.
We got a break right here. Can you hang on with us to talk some more?
Yes, sir. Would love to.
I love it. All right. You got Congressman Michael Guest coming right back.
Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our shop
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. We got Congressman Michael Guest on the line. All right, so you guys have been back in Washington since you had to vote to reopen the government. What's been going on since then? We know that the president signed off last night on the release of the Epstein files. You knew that vote was coming. I ran into you over the weekend at the football game. So how did that shake out in the House? I didn't check the vote tally.
Yeah, it was overwhelming. I think there was only one vote in opposition. That vote was Clay Higgins from the state of Louisiana. I think it was a very principled vote versus the fact that Clay did not Clay had any desire to cover up for Epstein. Clay is a former law enforcement officer from South Louisiana. But Clay has been consistent in his message that he thought that this was nothing more than a charade, and that there were not adequate protections in place to keep information from the public outside of victims. But Clay was the only vote in opposition. Outside of that, Gerard, every member in the House voted to support that. The Senate quickly hotlined the bill, was able to get it through the Senate with a unanimous vote, and then the president signed that into law. And so, the thing is that I don't believe that there's going to be any real revelation, and I've not seen the documents. I'm not on the committee of jurisdiction, but I know that the Oversight Committee has been looking into this now for months. The Oversight Committee has released 65,000 pages of documents already. In some prior conversations that I had with the director of the FBI, was told that as far as documents which could be released, that those documents were already released publicly. The only documents that the FBI director was aware of that had not been released were documents pursuant to grand jury subpoenas, and those would require the federal court to allow those documents to be released. But it was an overwhelming vote to release those documents. We will see if there was anything that comes out as those documents begin to be released over the next several weeks. But I would be surprised if there's any new revelation. But the good thing is, look, this issue's now been resolved. Whatever documents do exist will be released into the public domain, and we won't have, these ongoing conspiracy theories about whose name may be mentioned in the documents, not mentioned. This will all be put to rest, and we can get back to doing the important work of governing for the American people.
I agree. Yeah, it's I think gotten too much attention, honestly, and just need to move forward and work on the business for the people, as you indicate. So, what's on the legislative calendar at this point, Congressman? What is the Speaker saying he wants to take up?
The main focus that we're going to see between now and the end of the year, and I guess to the end of January, is the appropriations bills. And so as part of the agreement to reopen the government, 3 of the 12 appropriations bills were actually passed. And so every year, Congress must pass 12 individual spending bills to fund the government in its entirety. And so 3 of those were passed as part of the agreement to reopen the government. The appropriators in the House and Senate are working to try to see if we can come to agreement between the two bodies for the additional 9 spending bills, which we need to get across the finish line as quickly as possible. I am optimistic that before we go home for Christmas, that we will have 3 or 4 additional spending bills that we have been able to get to the House and the Senate floor, and hopefully onto the President's desk. So then when we return in January, we'll have probably 3 or 4 bills left to take up. But that is the main focus going forward. Now, that's not to say that is the only focus. This week we are also taking up legislation as it relates to D.C. crime. We're also taking up legislation as it relates to energy policy, as far as being able to open up additional areas for exploration, drilling, and production. And so we are working on several things kind of simultaneously. One of the things that I'm working on since I've been back is working with the department, or the Committee on Homeland Security, particularly the Border Subcommittee, which I chair. We're wanting to roll out legislation, hopefully first of the year, codifying some of the changes that President Trump has made that has been such a huge success to our border security, closing the border and preventing the flow that we saw under the Biden-Harris administration. The president has done an amazing job with that, but now we need to look at codifying those changes so that when there comes a day when President Trump is not in office, that the next president can't go back to the failed policies of the prior administration.
Okay. Well, that sounds like that's a pretty busy deal, because that's going to be an involved set of negotiations and deliberation just to get through that, because historically we really hadn't been able to get agreement, certainly in the Senate. You guys could agree in the House where you just need a simple majority, but you got to go over to the Senate and get some Democrats to peel off, as they finally did with the continuing resolution. Sure would be nice to get back to the regular order process of funding government.
It would be, and that's something that Mike Johnson has pledged to do. Is something that we have really been unable to do for the last couple of terms of Congress, and that we will either pass continuing resolutions to fund the government, or we will pass large omnibus spending bills where all the bills are put forth together, and you have to vote up or down on every individual, on all the bills as a whole, instead of being able to vote on the bills individually. And so we're seeking to return to that sense of regular order. We hope that now that the Democrats have had the shutdown and they have seen the impact the shutdown has on the American people, that we won't be right back in this same situation at the end of January. So we're going to take full advantage of the 2 months that we have to try to get as much done as possible and try to avoid future government shutdowns going forward.
Yeah. So I've got a question here on our text line. Asking if there is anything working in the House concerning our farmers. The farmers in the state of Mississippi are under enormous pressure. We had State Senator Andy Berry from the Beef Council on yesterday talking about the plight of the industry. Anything you guys are working on there?
A couple things. One, and just general, the Farm Bill, which is something that the Ag Committee has been working on for some period of time. We were actually able to get some of the key components of the Farm Bill in the budget reconciliation package, which was signed by the President in July. The President and the Secretary of Agriculture have both spoken about the possibility of using some of the tariff revenue to provide some additional payments to our farmers. Because, if you look at where we are, and of course we know that agriculture is the number one industry in our state. And if I'm remembering my numbers correct, almost 20% of our workforce is either directly or indirectly employed in the agriculture industry. So it has a huge impact on our state. We know that input costs are up. The cost of pretty much everything except fertilizer has gone up pretty dramatically since COVID. And commodity costs, the costs that the farmers are able to get once their products are brought to market, those costs have remained flat. So input cost up. The total amount that they return or that they see once their product is sold is flat. And it has put our farmers really across our state. Many of those farmers are really suffering, and we want to make sure that we are supporting them. It is an important issue, not just economically, but also it's a national security issue. We do not want to become dependent on any foreign nation to provide our food to the people of the United States. And so I think the President understands that, and I think he's looking at a way to send more money back to our farmers.
Okay. Well, I know that is you're right. It's a big issue here in the state of Mississippi because it's a little over a third of our total state's GDP, and, of course, it does employ a large number of Mississippians, the agricultural industry, and many of them are facing some serious financial headwinds, just a number of factors. So I think they will be glad to know that the Congress is aware and working on that. But as always, we appreciate you joining us, Congressman Michael Guest. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Gerard.
Yep, we're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From theseabrook.com.
Properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
a young boy, I played the silver ball. From Soho down to Brighton, I must have played them all. But I ain't seen nothing like him in any amusement hall. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays a mean pinball. He stands like a
I know we've discussed this before, but you couldn't produce a song like that today, could you?
Well, in no small part to the fact that the younger generation's like, what's pinball?
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. Man, I'll have to admit, back when I worked in the old bowling center, I think I talked about that. That's a big part, of course, of bowling facilities was to have the quarter games. I think they went from a nickel to a dime to a quarter eventually. But pinball machines, foosball machines, other kinds of little gaming machines. Before you could do that at home, right?
Oh, yeah.
So Space Invaders, Pac-Man. Who could forget that? I was actually a champion on Tank. Remember that one? And that's only because I worked there, and when we'd shut down, I had the key, and I could open it up and just keep playing and practicing. You couldn't get that good if you had to feed at quarters.
Not usually.
Oh, man. That's pretty cool. Appreciate that, though. So, and, of course, appreciate the congressman coming on with us today. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on up there in Washington. On the C Spire text line, healthcare again, Jerry in Waynesboro. If Trump sends money to people for healthcare, he better put triple Trump HC on the slot machines and give them a month of healthcare if they hit. Otherwise, the casino will get it all. Yeah, so when the president talks about sending out money to people to buy their own health care, just to clarify, he's not talking about sending them cash into their bank accounts or cash at all or checks, which is the way it used to work. No, that's not what he's talking about. This would work like the SNAP program does today, where it's electronic, it's EBT, and those funds would be deposited into that account, and you would have a way to spend that money only on qualified expenses. Okay, so it's not quite the same as I think what you are thinking of, which is just money's going to go out and dropped out of helicopters, and we're going to send checks that they'd go cash, and then, as you say, Jerry, then turn around and go hit the casinos. That would be, a disaster, obviously. And so don't see that happening. And that's not the plan whatsoever. But what's not getting a great deal of attention is that Bill Cassidy, the senator from Louisiana, he's no stranger to this health care reform deal. And he's actually talking about introducing a whole new plan. And really, it was not long after the president said, hey, instead of the way the subsidy structure works now, where we provide premium tax credits and pay those directly to the insurance companies, we're going to send you the funds and let you shop for your own health care. And so Bill Cassidy, not long after that, Rhino said, I'm on it, Mr. President. Now, this is something, by the way, he's been working on for quite some time, the senator from Louisiana, and talking about these expanding health savings accounts specifically. And that's what the president's talking about here. He's pitching this instead of enhanced ACA tax credits with these health savings accounts. Now, to be clear, this is a little different than the premium tax credits. This is really not a replacement for insurance. The health savings accounts that Senator Cassidy would propose would allow those to get this prepaid HSC, funded in part by the lapsed tax credits, he says. And you couldn't use those to pay for monthly premiums, but you could use them to pay for out-of-pocket health care expenses, co-pays, deductibles, co-insurance. So if you had a serious situation that required a lot of money that to pay for that exceeded the amount of your HSA, you wouldn't have insurance for that. You'd have to figure something else out. So I'm not really sure what the plan is. I don't see this as a replacement to full-blown insurance. I'm not opposing it. I just am curious as to if there are any other aspects of it, because what's being reported right now, and that's through interviews with the big media outlets with Senator Cassidy, no, that's not what he's planning. It's not to buy insurance. It's just, here you go, here's some money to take care of your health care. Hope that does it, because if you need more than that, sorry, you don't get any more. I'm not sure, honestly. I don't see that passing, honestly, in the Senate. I can see how a simple majority of Republicans can pass it. Would that reduce taxpayer cost? 100%, by a lot, honestly. And it depends on how the amounts would be structured of health savings accounts deposits, if you will. Would that be based on your income? I expect it would, just like the premium tax credits currently are. And then how much would that be? Now, currently, if everybody got the same amount, it'd work out that are currently enrolled in the exchanges, it'd work out to about $5,000 a head. That doesn't buy you a lot of health care, $5,000. It does as long as you don't get sick, as long as you don't have any major issue. But if you have some sort of medical event and you need a significant amount of care, you could blow through $5,000 easy. So I don't know that this is necessarily a full-blown replacement, but it does achieve the goal of, hey, we're not sending any more money to insurance companies. However, you are using the money to pay direct providers of health care, doctors, hospitals, clinics, medical device makers, pharmaceutical makers, etc. You are using the money to pay them, so I'm not sure how that's better than paying insurance companies. It's still federal tax money that's paying resources in the private sector. I don't see that really changing the dynamic too terribly much. But I hear you, Jerry. We certainly don't want, and that's not what the president's proposing, to put your mind at ease there, just sending out debit cards that you could use for anything, or checks, certainly, that you could use for anything. And I caught the other day that Secretary of Agriculture, I think, made a little mistake. I'm not trying to be critical here, but just a clarification. I think she meant it more as a metaphor that, instead of sending checks out for SNAP, which we don't do, we don't send checks out for SNAP. You know that. We just send electronic cards out, if you will, and they have funds on them. But there's a huge fraud industry in SNAP. Between the retailers, because they're involved as well. And I think, Rhino, most people could probably share examples where they've seen the impropriety occur. They swap it for cash and other stuff, all kinds of crazy schemes, because there's collusion between the retail people and the holders of the SNAP cards. And by the way, there's no ID check on that. The SNAP cards are like lottery tickets, like currency. They're bearer bonds. Who's ever got them in their possession can use them. It's not like, well, you got to show me your ID to use your SNAP card. No, you don't. It's not how it works. So, and then even though SNAP benefits aren't available to illegals, I get concerned about the not my problem people, because folks are supposed to provide some documentation that proves they're legal. And I'm not convinced that's handled. I know you're shocked at that. Handled properly. And then the other major change that we've talked about on the program is there's certain classes of legal immigrants that are eligible for these SNAP and Medicaid. But what the One Big Beautiful Bill Act did is it declared that some of those classes of legal immigrants are no longer eligible. Now, what I hope is that they find out that, I can't get Medicaid anymore. I'm talking about legal immigrants. Can't get Medicaid, can't get SNAP, can't get TANF, can't get housing assistance. I might as well go back home. And that has been happening somewhat. We've seen a lot of self-deport. You've seen the Secretary of Homeland Security running ads encouraging, we can help you now go so that you can immigrate legally. You've seen they're running ads doing that. And I think that's actually okay.
If you get deported, you
can't
not
come back. Yeah, that's right. And that's what she's encouraging. If we find you and we deport you, you ain't coming back. You might as well leave now and go apply for legal admission into this country. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Up of Mississippi.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. We appreciate you joining us across the state. Probably heard on our news during the breaks that Amazon Web Services made a major announcement today. Earlier today, a major investment in Warren County. I think, what was the price tag? $3 billion for data center facilities over there. We've already got Entergy investing significant amount of money in Warren County as well to boost electricity output to accommodate.
Yeah, at least $3 billion.
At least $3 billion. Yeah, if it works out anything the way the announcement in Madison did, you can expect that to be more. And by the way, I have learned, and this is not confidential information, but I think 4 or 5 of the data center buildings of the total 16 in this phase 1 of Amazon Web Services in Madison County will be on the books for tax purposes for the entirety of 2026. They're going to be spun up in production. That is amazing how quick they were able to do that. By the end of the year is the prediction. So good stuff there. Also, Rhino, I know you saw the story. Our governor is the vice chairman, I believe, of the Republican Governors Association. He was elected to that. Congratulations to Governor Tate Reeves in that honor and distinction. I think the governor of Montana, if I'm not mistaken, was elected the chairman. I think it's chairman and vice chairman of that group as far as the titles are concerned. So that's good news for our governor. Being at the top of the heap there, or certainly second in the org chart, in the hierarchy of all the Republican governors.
Yeah, it's chair and vice chair.
Chair and vice chair. Okay, great. So D.W. Madison says, is there any conversation regarding pricing on SNAP-eligible items? There are many stores that are grossly inflating prices on those items. I'm not sure how you would determine that, D.W. How do you determine that these items are inflated? I mean, what should they be? I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong, that that's not happening. And as Rhino likes to point out, anytime you got government injecting money into anything in the economy, yeah, there's a tendency to, oh, well, government's paying for that. It doesn't matter. But I'm not sure how we would determine that these eligible items are in fact inflated, because it's a bunch, right? It's not just like a handful as far as those which are eligible for the SNAP program. And our governor, of course, as you know, is seeking a waiver to prohibit the use of SNAP benefits on unhealthy foods, unhealthy SNAP foods, sugary drinks. I think that is a wise move. I think that makes sense. I really do believe that if the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for benefits for certain classes of people, that they ought to have a little bit more say about how you spend that money. I completely believe that. I think that's just reasonable.
Especially if that input leads to a bad output of bad health, which is also paid for by tax dollars.
That's completely right. I mean, they are linked 100%. Let's see here. Too bad we have Benny Thompson here in the Delta, so no one really wants to come in and invest. That's Brandon from Cleveland. Yeah, and honestly, Brandon, that's not it as much as it is. And I hear you. And yeah, Benny would have his hand out, I believe, and be playing the normal shakedown games. I don't care if he hears it or not. I believe it happens. That's my opinion. I've talked to too many people who've said, you can't come in unless you pay to play. You know that goes on big time. So it starts at the local level with respect to economic development. And the best thing Benny could do is stop championing life funded by taxpayers and championing life funded by your own work. And if you did that, I think you'd see more businesses say, yeah, I have an interest here, because the Delta's a great place, and there are a lot of great people. But it is true that Benny he stays in Congress, right, because of what he's able to pull down from Washington and inject into his district in a way that keeps him in office. And that's not necessarily, well, it's not. It's not in the best interest of the district, the citizens, or certainly the state of Mississippi. But it's in his best interest, right? And that's all that matters. So hopefully we can change that. Dan in Hattiesburg, we're talking about the video games. We used to play Combat on the old Atari 2600 with the paddle controllers. Drove my mom nuts. If you know, you know. With
the paddle controller?
I don't remember. How would you use that paddle controller?
Combat had to have the joystick.
I did too.
Maybe that's just because I was using a more updated version of Atari.
Okay.
But I thought Combat had to have the joystick.
I seem to
Maybe
recall
I'm
that
Joust.
as well.
One of them had to have the joystick or it just wouldn't play.
Tim from Tupelo says, Defender video game got all my quarters back in the day. Andy from Pontotoc, healthy foods are always best, but not only for SNAP recipients, but for everyone. Amen, Andy, agree. It's hard when you can get a cheeseburger for a couple of bucks and a salad is $8 to $10. I agree. There is a disparity, and it does make it more difficult to practice healthier eating habits. Fox News, SuperTalk News coming your way. After that, it's Lindsey Fredman, founder-owner, Main Street Collective.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays. We're live from the Element Wealth Studio on this Friday Eve. We welcome now Lindsey Fredman, founder, owner, Main Street Collective. Hey, Lindsey.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me on today.
All right, so tell us about the Main Street Collective.
So we are Mississippi's handmade community on Main Street. So we're an alternative for handmade businesses in Mississippi to having their own website, to going on Etsy. Only Mississippi makers are allowed on the site, and we advertise nationwide. We handle all of the tech, all of the search engine optimization, all of those major barriers for small handmade makers. We handle and push them out nationwide.
Okay, so how big an industry is that there? There are a lot of folks in the state of Mississippi, artisans and producers of these kinds of goods, craftsmen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's about 75,000 that are registered that we know of across the state of Mississippi. So it is a very large market. A lot of people are in the handmade community.
Okay. So
in the state.
What you're trying to do here is kind of give them all a common platform to sort of achieve the economies of scale, I guess, rather than trying to operate independently. Is that right?
Absolutely. So it's kind of like going to the mall. Well, back in the 80s, right, when they were really popular, where if you go to one store you may go there to JCPenney's, but on the way you're passing by 5 others, right? And so you get seen, you get common exposure. It's that ecosystem that we're trying to build. But really what we're trying to do is take away some of the tech headaches and barriers that small makers usually have. So in today's, e-commerce landscape, if you are not pushing large ad budgets, if you are not pushing social media, if you do not have a website that is really robust and high in the search engine rankings, you're simply not going to get seen. And so I go to a lot of vendor fairs, much to my husband's chagrin, because I spend a lot of money on the weekends at vendor markets. And I realized that a lot of folks, would say, hey, I ran out of money 5 minutes ago, but do you have a website or something I can go to? And what I found was that a lot of people might have a social media account. If they did have a website, it wasn't very user-friendly. And there's really no way for me to follow up with them later on. So Main Street Collective is really designed for those makers who don't want to deal with the tech headaches, who don't want to have to deal with building a website, maintaining a website, figuring out what search engine optimization is, plus running all of their social media, plus actually making items.
Okay.
And we handle all that tech stuff for them.
Interesting. Gotcha. Well, what do you got planned? Anything coming up for the holidays that you're going to focus on as part of this collective?
Absolutely. So we have a few things going right now. Of course, our Black Friday already started. Like most people, it started earlier this month. And so we have a lot of specials across the website right now. A few of those, I just like to highlight that the handmade community is often seen as just, candles like this one from Simone & Company, or earrings and things like that. But there's so much more, and there's so many more unique artisans across the state. So on Main Street Collective, you're going to find blacksmiths. You're going to find leather workers. You are going to find, one of my favorites is Mr. Buddy Grayson, who's 82 years old, and he chops trees down in his backyard in Yazoo City, Mississippi, and he turns them into beautifully handcrafted birdhouses. And so not only are you going to find great products on our site, but you're going to find the stories behind the people, the makers of Mississippi, and what their value is that they bring to the community. And that's really what we want to put forward. So you'll find all of those things. And then helping us this year is Mississippi Mima, who is a big internet personality across Facebook. She actually decided to partner up with us this year for her holiday guide. And so she's doing a lot of featuring of Mississippi makers, Mississippi small businesses. And our push really this year is to try to get people to keep our dollars in the state, shop local, and shop Mississippi. And when you do it, hopefully you'll shop Mississippi online at Main Street.
Got it. So why do you think there's so many craftsmen, artisans, just creative people in the state of Mississippi? We have a reputation for that across a spectrum of the arts, but this is no different.
I think it's probably the heat and the water, right? It's just in there. No, we're a very creative state. We have a lot of artisans. And I think part of it, so you'll find a lot of candle makers, a lot of soap makers. But a lot of times people get into these industries because they have a problem themselves that mass produced items aren't solving.
Okay.
So for example, Jessie, who owns Country Lather Soap Works, she would get out of the shower every time she took a shower and she was itchy. Always itchy. Her skin always itched.
Yep.
And someone finally told her that's not normal. And her mother started making her goat milk soap. And with that soap, she started using it and the itching went away. But she couldn't buy that in the stores. So she started making it. She was a bus driver out in Perkinston, Mississippi. And during COVID, she's out of work. And so her friends were like, hey, can I get some of that soap?
Yep.
And they encouraged her to go out and push it. So she got popular on TikTok. She's selling her soaps. And now she's one of TikTok's largest earners. She's done a great job. And her target audience is really making soap that cuts through grease, that is good and really focuses on blue-collar workers, right? You can smell good
Very
and have
creative.
your skin still feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Very creative. So are these kinds of products being marketed across the world, the region, the state? What's the reach?
So for us, we market nationwide, mostly because we've just started this year, and so we'll start dealing with tariffs and getting it internationally shipped later on next year.
Yeah.
But this year we market nationwide. In fact, we had 4 sales on the site just while I was waiting for this, we had about 4 sales to California and Oregon this morning.
Wow.
And that was of soaps and some fidget toys.
Huh.
So you're going to find a whole cross-section of things on the site. But we do market and advertise nationwide. And we spend a lot of time and effort making sure that people's items can get found through Google searches.
So if someone's out there tuned in and they have an interest in marketing their products, how do they do that?
They can simply go to mainstreetco.us, which is our website, and click on Become a Vendor. And if you're a Mississippi maker, then we will gladly work with you to help push your products. And Main Street is a lot more than just a website. We really are building a community of folks who support each other. So we have monthly vendor calls where we talk about what are the latest marketing strategies, what are the latest trends in e-commerce, what are we seeing on the site, and even helping each other find vendor markets that they may go to. And we will provide free social media audits of their social media, help them learn how to market themselves and leverage social media to their benefit. And if they want to push paid advertising, we'll help them with that as well.
Okay.
So if you're a Mississippi maker, come join us.
Lots of value. Sounds kind of like an association of people in the same line of business there.
It is very much so. And it's one that, unlike some of the big folks like Etsy, Etsy has millions of makers on there, and it used to be the handmade site, but now it's completely overrun with drop ship stuff from China, right?
Yeah.
And it is very hard for makers to get seen there.
Okay.
And you have to pay for every listing, and those bills really rack up quickly.
Yeah.
So we're a low-cost, low-tech solution for Mississippi makers.
Anything that you've got planned for the future you want to talk to us about?
Well, right now we are in Mississippi, but this has taken on so well, and we've had so much interest from some of our neighboring states that next year we are hoping to establish a similar presence in Alabama. So if you have listeners in Alabama, be on the lookout for us. But next year we're really hoping to scale up the amount of vendors on Main Street Collective here in Mississippi. We want to be in the 400, 500 range so that when you want to go buy gifts for family members, for friends, that you stop at Main Street first and try to shop local and find what you need on our site.
Sounds like you have a goal of being very convenient, easy to use. That's really kind of what put Amazon on the map, honestly. It's just so simple, so straightforward, so intuitive. And if you've got an interface like that, you're likely to get a lot of business. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
I hope so. Absolutely. And we do get a pretty decent amount of traffic right now, so we definitely want to expand that. But mostly we want to expand that traffic for our makers.
Yeah. Well, and it's just good for the overall economy for the state of Mississippi. I didn't realize there were so many involved in that industry, but that's good to know.
Yeah, and it's a very overlooked industry, right? People go to vendor markets on weekends, and they often think that it's not as fancy or high-end, but we really have a lot of skilled artisans.
Yeah. No doubt. Mississippi's blessed in that regard. Lindsey, we appreciate you coming on and talking to us about the Main Street Collective. Lindsey Fredman, founder, owner of the Main Street Collective, has been our guest. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. We're stepping aside for a break. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Hello. Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Markets have soured, and that's because they're still into that Fed watching. They're not getting the good feeling, our investors, that the Fed is going to cut the benchmark interest rate in December. And so there's a big sell-off, despite the fact that not only did NVIDIA have a blowout quarter, but Walmart. Man. And here's what's a little surprising. No mention of tariffs in their con call where they presented their quarterly results. I'm not sure what's happening, honestly, with the tariffs. I don't know that we know the whole story. I'm not convinced that retailers or importers are absorbing all those costs and not passing them on. I'm not convinced that exporters are reducing their prices. I don't know what in the heck's going on, honestly. But it's not aligning with predictions. I'll say that. It's not really fueling major inflation. And also, there's not quite the chaos we expected in the markets overall. But at this point, it seems like the focus is on the interest rate situation. They just don't have a good feeling about that. Ben on the C Spire text line says, I think y'all touched on it a bit yesterday, but it sounds like the plan for PERS will require $200 million cash infusion every year for the next 30 years. I'm sure y'all get Senator Sparks on before the session begins, but I want to hear if he believes that type of cash going out every year will delay the phasing out of the income tax. So a couple of things there, Ben. Yes, the actuaries have presented proposals to key legislators involved in shaping PERS policy, including Senator Sparks and, of course, the PERS board. And I think there are 6 options that they presented. One of those was just write a check for $200 million a year for the next 30, and you're good to go. That's absolutely true. And then your question about might that impact phasing out the income tax? Well, keep in mind that there are some triggers, but because of the drafting error, it's not likely those triggers will come into play. Now, it is also quite possible that we may find ourselves with this infusion into PERS in a situation where when the LBO does a projection of revenues and expenses for the state, which is the difference which is used to determine whether or not the income tax can be cut by a certain percentage. And there are 3 different levels of those. I don't have that committed to memory. But the bottom line is, unless there is an excess of revenue over expenses, there's no mechanism to cut the tax rate. So at a minimum, you got to have a surplus, but it doesn't have to be very much because of the drafting error. You guys recall the misplacement of the decimal point. I call that in my presentations, make decimal points great again, because they weren't too great as far as those who had the goal of instituting financial triggers as a condition to further whittle away at the income tax rate. That's after it gets down to 3%. That's automatic. We're going to 4 next year. We're at 4.4 this year. We go to 4 next year, and then we go down to 3 over the next 4 years. Is the next 4? I think it's quarter point increments, not 3 increments, but nonetheless, that's automatic. And then after that, it's based on the trigger. He also says, does Ben, also I really hope the continued investment from Amazon and other major data center companies will result in nuclear reactors being constructed, whether they are small modular reactors or a new large-scale reactor at Grand Gulf. Yeah, I mean, Rhino and I think both are in total accord on that, which is that's the future of electricity. And I think you're starting to see more people across the country get that message as well. We are behind because we could have been building nuclear power plants, but crazy people in the country wouldn't let us do it. And the
hippies.
Right, exactly. So I'm all for it. I think it is clean and safe, and it's what am I trying to say? It's they're unlimited in supply. So it's not like, well, once
I mean, there's a finite amount of uranium in the Earth's crust.
That's true.
But we will run out of it much later than we would run out of fossil fuels.
Yes.
Or, heck, probably wind energy.
Well, let's be honest. Whoever succeeds us as humans, by the time we get to that point, they'll come up with something else at that point that we can't even comprehend today. So I'm not worried about that.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with talking about renewable energy with greenies and leftists and liberals and losers, is they point to two totally different ideas as the same thing, kind of like they do with immigration. Legal immigrants and illegal immigrants, they pile them all in one big pile of sad sacks.
Yeah.
Technically, our future will likely be powered by solar power. It will not be powered by fields and mountains covered with solar panels.
Agree.
There's a ton of energy being pumped out of the plasma engine that is the sun.
Yep.
If we can harness that, which one of the more sci-fi ways to get people to understand that would be a Dyson sphere, where you put panels around the sun itself to collect the energy. That is the extreme long-term end goal of energy production for humanity, is to harness the giant ball of plasma energy out in space. Until we get there, nuclear is our best option.
And of course, that, as you know, requires something I talked about yesterday, human innovation to figure out a way to harvest that virtually infinite supply of energy from our sun. No doubt about it. And, you know, I don't think it's out of the range of crazy to think that that's God's plan. Use these fossil fuels, which I gave you underneath the earth, until you get to the point where you're so dang smart, you can figure out how to get this sun I gave you. Seriously, that's a plausible theory. And in the meantime, by the way, this human innovation that's developed a way to split atoms to produce power. But I'm with you, Ben.
I mean, you don't have to get technical on. You can really make it pretty simple and actually kind of dumb sounding. We have these rocks. We'll call them magic rocks. You put them in water, the water boils, you take that steam, and people can figure out a steam engine.
That's right.
Because they've seen the steam locomotive. But one of those magic rocks blew up half a world away a generation ago, and all the hippies got real scared. So we had to stop using the magic rocks.
That's exactly right.
Now imagine where we would be as a species if Caveman 1 decided fire is too dangerous because Caveman 2 burned down his hut.
And that's always, as we've talked about, the response from the folks that lean left is, you just got to do without. We can't solve that problem. We can't fix it. Nope, immediately do without. It's insane. It's like built into their DNA is this do without. You just got to sacrifice it, do without. No, you don't. If we're going to use human ingenuity to figure out a way to address this problem, this is too valuable. There's too much to be derived from, in that case, nuclear power. So I think you're going to see it, Ben, but there's no rush to do it right now because we have this abundance of natural gas, and the electricity producers have developed a way to power gas turbines with natural gas and produce enough electricity to meet our needs. But I'm with you in that. I do think the next phase is nuclear. I do think you're going to see some construction of nuclear power plants, including the use of small modular reactors. And I happen to believe that we'll ultimately approach a point where there'll be a lot of addresses and consumers of electricity that won't even connect to the typical grid. They'll be self-sufficient and produce their own power. I don't know what all that will look like. I know there's a lot of technology being developed to do just that right now, from roofing materials to masonry to windows and ceiling tile, all kinds of crazy ways, harnessing the friction of elevators going up and down. I mean, it's just because, again, God gave us these brains and people are able to use them to design these novel technologies that solve human problems. It's what he expects of us, I believe. And the overall quality of life continues to improve. By the way, Elon Musk says he predicts that work will be optional in the coming decades. He says AI and humanoid robots will eliminate poverty and make everyone wealthy. Coming right back.
From the Seabrook.com weather.
Mississippi.
So awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The local rock group down the street is trying hard to learn their song.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. That'd be the Monkees. I'm trying to get the house band to play that one, by the way. I think it's my favorite Monkees tune. Mickey Dolenz on the drums playing that one. Another Pleasant Valley Sunday. Brandon from Cleveland says, I've had some from other countries tell my wife if she spends above a certain amount, they will eat the tariffs. So, Brandon, I'm assuming your wife imports goods in some way. That would also... but also keep in mind that she, as the importer, is paying the tariff. So the way that the exporter would absorb the tariffs is by reducing their cost of goods to your wife by that amount. So lowering their prices, thus absorbing effectively the tariffs. But your wife, as the American importer, is still the party who would remit to the federal government. And that, there's been a lot of talk about using tariff money for this, that, and the other. It almost feels like, Rhino, the same narrative you hear a lot about, well, we just cut out the foreign aid. I mean, we've spent that foreign aid so much, it's up to about, $10 trillion a year. And it's $40 billion a year. I wish it were zero, but it's not the panacea. And nor is the tariff revenue. So we're going to send dividend checks out. No, we're going to pay down on the deficit. No, we're going to send it to the farmers. You heard Congressman Guest say that. Well, which is it? Because it ain't that much money, relatively speaking. When you're collecting $300 billion in tariffs, but your deficit's $2 trillion, that's not a lot. That's 15%. So of the deficit. So if you're going to say, well, we're going to send dividend checks out or we're going to send money to farmers and we're going to just say that that's coming from tariff revenue, that's still money we're borrowing. No matter how you look at it, it's money we're borrowing. It's a shell game of money because we still have a deficit. Until we get out of the deficit spending mode, there is no surplus money from any source that you could say, okay, that's it. That's what we're going to use. Now, I could make the case in the state of Mississippi that, in fact, we are producing surpluses, $500, $600 million. So, to Ben's point a minute ago, if the legislature acted on the actuary's proposal to just write a check for $200 million a year to the PERS fund, yeah, as long as we're generating $500 million surpluses, we literally have the money to do that. But once we reach a point where we're not producing those surpluses, that's when you got to get back in the room and figure it out because it ain't going to happen. So my personal preference would be to just let the tariff revenue, however long that's going to continue, because we have seen some pullback on that the president announced late last week on a lot of food products in particular that this country imports. But whatever amount of that money is coming in, just let it work like it does now, which is go into the general fund and use that to at least reduce the deficits by that amount. That's money we otherwise would not have had because we ain't close to getting to the point where the budget's going to balance. So just moving it out of there, that just means, okay, well, then we got to go borrow more money. So we're not really achieving anything. In my view, let it go in the general fund, and let's work on getting our budget squared away. The good news is with the Fed, the Atlanta Fed, predicting 4% GDP, normally you would expect that income to the government would rise because of an increase in economic activity. You'll have more corporate taxes because they're making more money. You'll have more people working. You've got real wages going up. That means that's more income taxes that would be remitted to the federal government, to the Treasury. So that's the way you address that issue. Let's see here. Just who do we owe and when they're going to call the loan, says Jerry in Waynesboro. Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we've shared before. If you look at the breakdown of who owns our debt, it's primarily us. And what I mean by us is it's banks, it's financial institutions, it's individual investors, it's corporations. That's who holds U.S. Treasuries, our debt. Some is held by the Federal Reserve, about $7 trillion of the $38 trillion, and then another $6 to $7 trillion is held by foreign countries. But the vast majority of the rest of it is held by just folks out there, the public, if you will, is what it's called, debt held by the public. And by the way, foreign countries are considered the public in that respect. The distinction is between government, the Fed, and the public. And in this case, the public is, like I said, institutional investors, individuals, retirement funds such as PERS, banks, etc. And the government keeps paying them interest and redeeming the principal. And as long as that happens, then folks are going to continue to buy U.S. debt. Does it require borrowing money to pay the debt? Crazy enough, yes, it does. That's the cycle that we are certainly in, which is a problem. Mo says eventually we will be able to power collectors close to the sun, and they will beam the power back to Earth for use. I think that's kind of what you were talking about, wasn't it, Rhino? So, yes, but I completely agree with you. What we're accustomed to today are these rooftops and fields out there with a bunch of small 3x3, whatever the size is, solar panels installed. Yeah, that's current day, but that's not the future of harvesting sun.
I mean, solar panels are a little bit more advanced than I just went blank on the name for it, but the bimetallic strip that tells your toaster when your toast is done.
Yeah.
But it's essentially the reverse engineering of that. It's a little more complicated, and they're a little bit more efficient than your average toaster.
Yeah.
But that's the level we're at with solar-generated power. That's nowhere near enough to power a civilization. You got to get much closer to the sun and be able to collect and hold much more power than we do currently before solar-generated power takes over any meaningful percentage of the amount of power needed for human beings.
Yeah. But again, though, wouldn't you agree that the future is not fields full of solar panels?
No.
As far as use, it's very inefficient relative to the power
Well, I say no. I mean, there are loser leftists and worthless liberals out there that would love to see the environment, the same one they cry over whenever, oh, my goodness, you can't build here because the little muskrats aren't going to have any place to live. Those same people would love to see every field on the planet covered with solar panels just so they could feel like they were being a good person.
And every coastline replete with windmills, right? The president has pointed that out. What a dumb thing that is. I agree. On the C-Spire text line, how does the government owe the Fed? Well, because the Fed does have a balance sheet and it does have buying power, and it buys U.S. Treasuries. It currently owns about $4.5 trillion of U.S. debt. That was as of early 2025. It's probably a little more than that now. I hadn't checked it. But when you hear the discussion of the Fed needs to shrink its balance sheets, Fed needs to increase its balance sheet, that all has to do with the injection of capital into the banking system by buying usually federal debt from banks to give them more cash to loan, if you will. So that's part of what the Fed does. It's called the Federal Open Market Operations. And when you hear them talk about shrink the balance sheet or boost the balance sheet, expand the balance sheet, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about their holdings of federal debt that they typically buy from member bank institutions. Don't want to get too wonky into the banking and finance world, but yeah, that's the deal. The big thing to keep in mind is that it's not true that China owns $38 trillion of our debt, which is the total amount that's sitting on the Treasury's balance sheet as a liability. That's not true. China does not own, but last I checked, about $700 billion of our debt, which is, less than 2% of the total. They, by the way, have been shrinking their holdings of U.S. debt. And so that's not – and you know what really bothers me, Rhino, and I know I've talked about this, is that there are members of the U.S. House and Senate that will go on the floor and talk about, we're going to have to go borrow more from China. No, we don't. China's not buying our debt. So you're wrong about that. Senator Rand Paul, remember how often he said that? Why can't they get that right? Shouldn't they know that sort of stuff before they say that in front of the world?
He's too busy decorating that cart with stickers and stuff that he spent your tax dollars on, so he can whinge and moan on the floor about spending too much of your tax dollars.
I guess that it's hard for me to really get behind him, and I know that he is a serious player when it comes to reining in spending and getting control.
No, he's not. He just found his niche.
Well, you could be right about
that. It's still all about attention.
I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. But you should have command of those facts before
Which is proof he's not serious.
Okay. Before you stand before the U.S. Senate and bloviate those details. And you're wrong. Coming right back.
Think for a moment.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
That, of course, is the great band Chicago, and they're coming to the Brandon Amphitheater next year, May 1st. You don't want to miss it. Rhino's going to give you some tickets.
Yeah, tickets are already on sale now at the Brandon Amphitheater box office, or you can go to Ticketmaster.com to pick some up. But we're giving you a chance to win a pair of tickets for free to see Chicago in Brandon on May 1st. Be the 15th person to text in on the C Spire text line. That's 601-879-4395. Be the 15th person to text in the words "Color My World" to the C Spire text line, and you'll win a pair of tickets to see Chicago at the Brandon Amphitheater on May the 1st.
Color My World, a great Chicago hit. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Terry Kath, was he the lead singer? He, of course, was the lead guitarist that died tragically in a shooting accident. It was written by James Pankow. He is, of course, one of the founding members. I think I'm pretty sure he was one of the wind instrument players. But yeah, great tune. It was one of those tunes back in the 70s where you played that for your girlfriend, sort of deal. All right, one story I got to get out there. I'm going to answer the question about the Social Security Trust Fund, so-called trust fund, in a minute. And that is that law enforcement officers, first responders specifically in Mississippi, they are asking for a separate state retirement plan. Now, recall that our state government enacted a new Tier 5 in the public employees retirement system. All new employees in the public sector, when they work for employers that participate in PERS, which is virtually all of them in the public sector, that they would be included in this new tier, Tier 5. And the goal of Tier 5 was to try to shore up the finances of the PERS system, because employers would continue to contribute the full 19.9% of payroll into the fund, but the actual employee would only receive half of that into their PERS defined benefit fund. They would contribute half to that fund themselves, half to a defined contribution plan. The employer could optionally contribute to the defined contribution plan. So it's what's called a hybrid. But it had some other provisions that have gotten the attention of first responders. The key one, really there's two, but the key one is retirement eligibility would increase from 30 to 35 years at any age, or at age 62 with 8 years. And so there's concerns about working 35 years. And then there's no cost of living adjustment in the new Tier 5. So law enforcement, first responders in Mississippi are requesting the legislature to allow them to create a whole new retirement system just for them. I think there's about 9,000, as I recall when I looked that up, total. That includes, by the way, the Highway Patrol, which currently do have their own separate retirement system. The risk here is that, okay, that's fewer people joining PERS, which is what's necessary to join and be in this Tier 5 to address the current financial condition. And then the other concern I have, and no disrespect to the first responders, I agree that 35 years is a problem and that needs to be addressed. But the other concern I have is that what other groups are going to show up and say, hey, we don't like that Tier 5, we want our own plan. In which case you can count on the whole PERS program going kaput unless the legislature invests even more money than the actuaries are proposing. So this is going to be a very controversial matter that I think is going to get a lot of attention in the coming legislative session. Looks like Rhino is determined that we have a winner at this point. Yep. And then the question we had earlier about the IOU and the lockbox, yeah, that was something that Al Gore had proposed, I want to say back in 1999. And this is a myth that the Congress has robbed the Social Security Trust Fund. By law, the Social Security program must invest its surpluses when it takes in more money from workers than it pays out to retirees or those receiving disability benefits. When it has an excess, a surplus, which it has for many, many, many years until the last couple, then it buys treasuries, but they're special issue bonds. The Treasury issues those and pays interest and also redeems the principal. There are different maturities of it, just like standard Treasury bills. But every single bond has been paid back in full. It's not sitting in an IOU. There is some $2 trillion on the balance sheet of the Fed as a receivable. I should say the Treasury as a receivable. But those are getting paid. The bills get paid. Nobody's robbed it. It does give more cash for the government to spend, but since when do they care about that when they run up $2 trillion deficits? They don't, is the answer. So not really a solution to the overall financial problem. Out of here today, back tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.